She crawls out of a hole cut by centuries of rain and thinks the worst is coming. Ruriko Morishita, 17, expects beasts. Instead, she gets an order in English, then in her own tongue. Medical inspection, water point, food line. A Navy corpsman holds up soap. A Nisei interpreter says, the water is safe. On Easter Sunday, the 1st of April 1945, America lands on Okinawa and unlocks something rare in war. Victory that smells like disinfectant and cooked rice. The plan was written before the first foxhole. Each of the 4 U.S. divisions was allocated 70,000 pounds of rice and soybeans and told to funnel civilians to military government units. Doctors, corpsmen, quartermasters, engineers, an army of Hygiene moved behind the assault with clean water and medical kits. Their mission sounds simple: evacuate unarmed natives out of the fire and keep them alive. At scale, that simplicity is genius. Food to prevent starvation, and many tons of DDT to kill the vectors that had killed armies for centuries. Ruriko limps forward, still in a ragged uniform, still bleeding. She has hauled water at night, scavenged weeds, watched staff expel civilians from caves that once felt safe. Now she is washed, dusted, counted, and fed. The floor of the aid station is clean. Buckets are labelled, tools are boiled. The worst was indescribable, she will say, and the smell of carbolic is the first sentence of a new life. She touches the rim of a basin just to feel the enamel, proof that order has weight. A Marine with a Thompson slung on the centre pole spoons canned peaches into a grandmother's mouth. Children giggle through fear. We did not come here to play Santa Claus, the commander had told his staff, but the line cooks still slip candy after chow. The American state is not being generous by accident. It has chosen, in advance, to win twice. Once by arms, again by cleanliness. Even the propaganda breaks under this kind of order. People taught to expect Dracula and find interpreters who bow and say, safe water, and mean it. The corpsman smiles when the grandmothers grade his hand-washing. This is how America fights here, with rifles and rice, with M1 Garands and latrines, with DDT sprayed like ammunition. Ruriko lays down on a canvas cot and breathes without coughing. She stares at a roof that does not drip. She sleeps. The battle still rages, but the camp already looks like tomorrow. They will be paid the going 1,940 wage of 1 yen a day for road work and mess duty. Over 250,000 civilians will be herded into crowded camps, and yet epidemics will be averted because many tons of DDT drown the flies and mosquitoes. The oddest discipline problem becomes getting elderly women to use the latrine line. It sounds small. It wins the island. America makes hygiene into strategy, and tomorrow into policy, and even a teenager from a ruined cave can feel it in her lungs. A grandmother grips her cane and shakes when the American points to the water can. Then a young soldier kneels, bows, and speaks Okinawan in a soft voice. He is a Nisei interpreter, first-generation Japanese-American, wearing the same uniform and the same boots as the rifleman. The water is safe, he says, and it lands with the power of artillery. The line moves. Fear turns into cooperation in seconds because America planned for that moment months earlier. Before the landing, the 10th Army printed a brochure that told Marines and soldiers who the islanders were. Simple, polite, law-abiding, and resentful of Japanese big islanders who treated them like tools. It warned troops not to expect welcomes, not to confuse civilians with combatants. It told them to hand civilians to military government teams already built for hygiene, food, and housing. Then the plan attached Nisei to forward units and pushed them right behind the assault. Culture became a supply line. The interpreter's job is small and enormous. He calms the mothers, explains the delousing powder, and points to the latrine line. He warns that the Americans will search, tag, and separate people for safety. He does it with respect, and the crowd watches the tone as much as the orders. He is not a prop. He is the hinge that swings fear. He carries a notebook and writes in block letters for those who cannot hear over the shell bursts. The enemy had primed these people to see monsters. The brochure even predicted the first look they would give GIs, a mix of Dracula and the sad sack. On that ground, a single sentence in the right accent cracks years of propaganda. The villagers see paid work details and blankets, not random chaos. They see corpsmen teaching hand-washing. They see the flag and smell cooked rice and disinfectant, and understand that power and mercy can ride in the same truck. The interpreter watches a girl in rags touch a clean basin like it is made of gold. He smiles but keeps moving because his job is throughput. Keep the line moving, keep the questions answered, keep the rumors dead. He is an American and a bridge, and a living reason the system works. In his wake, rifles stay slung, buckets stay full, and one more impossible thing becomes normal. The enemy's civilians start trusting us in a war zone. In that first week, the forward teams also count out rice and soy allocations fixed at £70,000 per division, and they post work notices for road crews and hospital helpers at £1 a day, the going 1,940 wage. The numbers are plain until you watch them work. They turn a panicked crowd into an organised labour force that builds its own safety. They feed people at scale while the regiments keep moving. They prove that only America could land with rifles and arrive with translators, planners, and paymasters in the same hour. A Marine opens a can and spoons peaches into a grandmother's mouth while children stare, wide-eyed and silent. He has dirt in every crease and a Thompson on his shoulder, but his hands are careful. They were crying and praying. Another Marine remembered, after his platoon accidentally shot civilians in the dark. He wondered whether they had become what the movies showed in China, then spent the night hauling the wounded to safety. That pivot remorse to repair is how America took the moral high ground and kept it. The camps looked rough, but they were built on math. Minimum food was issued to prevent starvation. Many tons of DDT were sprayed to break the old killers' mosquitoes, fleas, flies. Latrine lines were staked and enforced, even when the oddest discipline problem was convincing elderly women to use them. Headcounts by village went up on chalkboards. Mothers were moved to houses in undamaged towns. Farming tools appeared, and with them a hint of normal life. The men who fought by day lifted babies and carried the aged by night. They did not do it to feel good. They did it because military government said the only way to control an enemy population at minimum cost was to keep it fed and disease-free. The plan reduced native aid to the Japanese 32nd Army and kept the front moving. It was not softness, it was the hard edge of American system thinking. The villagers had been told Americans were monsters. The first bowls of rice and the first clean bandages cut that story down. An interpreter says, "The water is safe," and a line forms. A corpsman rinses a basin, and the smell of carbolic fills the tent. The grandmother who gets the peaches bows so deeply she almost falls. She has lived weeks in a cave where the air hurt to breathe. Now she is full and warm and seen. By week's end, 1,000 cans of peaches have gone down those lines. Children get candy after chow. Men who fired rifles by day push wheelbarrows by night. The ledger shows progress that does not look like war. Calories issued, fevers down, lines shorter. It is messy, imperfect, human, and overwhelmingly American. Mercy becomes psychological warfare, and the enemy learns that the people trust the flag that feeds them. The brigadier general in charge reminded everyone, "We did not come here to play Santa Claus," and yet the plan still pushed rations, blankets, and medical attention forward, because that is how you keep an army moving. The brochure had warned that Okinawans would look at Americans like a mix of Dracula and the sad sack at first. By the time the peaches ran out, many were bowing in thanks, those who believed the gifts weren't poisoned. Eventually, over 250,000 civilians were herded into overcrowded camps where epidemics did not explode. A corpsman draws a line in the mud and calls it a latrine. The grandmothers laugh, then turn shy, then try it, because the young man washes his hands first and shows the new way. It is a tiny theatre with a huge payoff. Many tons of DDT billow like white fog around the camp's edges, and the old killer's mosquitoes, fleas, and flies drop out of the air. This is how America crushes an invisible enemy while fighting a very visible one. Military government's hygiene drill is a set of simple commandments enforced with kindness and steel. Sight the water point upstream, stake the latrine line downwind, boil the tools, bleach the buckets, delouse the crowd, issue minimum food to keep people standing without pulling too many supplies from the front, count heads by village and keep the chalkboard clean, move women and children to undestroyed houses, hand out farming tools so fields can start again. The oddest discipline problem, one account said, was getting elderly women to use the latrines. It sounds like a joke until you think like a planner. Human waste feeds flies, flies feed fevers, fevers feed death. A good latrine line is an artillery strike against disease. An interpreter repeats the rules every hour in the local tongue. A sergeant who never thought he would care about hand-washing discovers he is saving lives with a bar of GI soap. The enemy runs a different system underground. In the caves, student nurses and aides are ordered to fetch water through shell fire and scavenge weeds, while medics expel civilians because military units have priority. The air is damp and heavy, and the fevers grow. When those same women crawl into an American aid tent and see a floor that is swept and a basin that reflects light, they are stunned. The shock is moral and practical at once. The occupier has turned sanitation into strategy. Behind the line of tents, quartermasters release rice and soy allocated at £70,000 per division, and pay clerks count out $1 wages for road crews and mess hands. The camps swell toward 250,000 people, and still the charts trend the right way. Calories rising, outbreaks absent. The point is not charity. The point is, throughput move civilians, move supplies, move units so the rifle companies can keep pressing south. Hygiene is the hinge that makes everything else turn on time. A line forms next to a folding table. There are no medals on it, only a ledger, a rubber stamp, and coins. An American officer calls names the best he can and counts out the going 1,940 wage $1 a day for Okinawans who worked as road labourers, mess hands, and hospital attendants. A widow signs with an inked thumb and buys sweet potatoes at a camp stall for a niece she found in the chaos. Payday, in the middle of a battle, is a shock more powerful than a pamphlet. It works because it is part of a larger machine. Military government units shadow the assault, separate civilians from the fight, and rebuild a working economy fast enough to serve the front. Those teams include doctors, corpsmen, engineers, quartermasters, and Nisei interpreters. They plan ration points and water points with the same care as ammo dumps. The job is control at minimum cost, feed, pay, and protect, so the population does not feed the Japanese 32nd Army. The result is order in a place that felt like the end of the world. Men who fought all day become supervisors by night. A corporal shows how to stack crates so the rain runs off. A sergeant teaches a teenager how to set a pot over a safe flame. An interpreter translates jokes because jokes are oil for a new machine. The ledger fills with names and hours and little check marks. It looks boring until you see what those marks mean to a line of people who were starving yesterday. The enemy never planned for this. Under Tokyo's rule, Okinawans were used as labor and kept apart. Now the Americans pay wages and hand out tools and pull families into undestroyed houses, because people who have roofs do not wander into machine gun cones. It is strategic mercy. It turns potential saboteurs into workers and rumor into routine. It changes the shape of the night. The commander reminds his staff, "We did not come here to play Santa Claus, and the pay table proves it. This is not charity. This is policy. Each division's allocation of £70,000 of rice and soy is counted out with the same care as ammunition, and many tons of DDT ride in the same convoys. Over time, the detention camps swell past 250,000 people, and yet epidemics do not bloom. The books balance, the roads hold, the front moves. It feels impossible until you watch every job link to every rifle. A chalkboard stands under a tarp with rain ticking on the canvas. It lists villages, head counts, rice tonnage, and latrine status. A young lieutenant runs a finger down the columns and nods, then sends a truck to a water point that is running low. This is the war behind the war, and it is ruthless in its own way. Everyone is somewhere on that board. The Milgoft mission is clear. Evacuate unarmed civilians from combat zones to assembly points, then move them to camps in villages with undestroyed houses. Issue farming tools so fields can restart. Attach Nisei interpreters to calm and guide. Keep the chalkboard clean and the lines moving. The aim is control at minimum cost, which in practice means life for people who expected none. It is a logistics state built in weeks. By mid-campaign, the numbers go from amazing to unbelievable. Over 250,000 people are concentrated in detention camps. Minimum supplies prevent starvation. Potentially destructive epidemics are averted because many tons of DDT choke the skies over the garbage pits and fences. The oddest discipline problem is still teaching elderly women to use the latrine line. When they do, the fever curve breaks. A statistic turns into a warm night without coughing. The people who walk into this machine have stories. A girl from Maccabee who crawled out of the Cave of the Virgins with wounds and fever touches a clean basin and stares. A grandmother who bowed until she almost fell now supervises a work detail with a whistle. A boy who used to scavenge weeds learns to boil tools and bleach buckets. These are tiny promotions that add up to survival, and they build trust faster than any leaflet. At the front edge, rifles still crack and mortars thump. In the rear, trucks bring rice and soy with the same tempo as ammo. The first time, the line moved because a Nisei interpreter said the water was safe. Now it moves because people have learned the rhythm of an American camp. They show up, they help, they sleep under roofs that do not leak. The island is still a battlefield, but the board under the tarp looks more and more like a census of tomorrow. The scale clicks when you do the math. 4 divisions landed on April 1, each with 70,000 pounds of rice and soy earmarked for civilians. Pay tables hand out 1 yen wages for road crews and hospital attendants. The brochure had warned troops that Okinawans might stare as if at a mix of Dracula and the Sad Sack. And they did at first, but the stare faded when the peaches, blankets, and medicine kept coming. "We did not come here to play Santa Claus," the commander said. He came to control an enemy population at minimum cost, and that required food, hygiene, and order. The cave is wet, the air thick, and the orders cruelly simple. The student aides will fetch water at night and scavenge weeds by day, while the medical staff keeps civilians out. Ruriko learns the rhythm of despair. Drag, cough, sleep in rags, repeat. Then the world flips. She steps into an American tent where the floor is scrubbed, the buckets are labelled, and the smell is carbolic, not rot. The shock is like light after months underground. She reaches for the enamel basin just to feel proof that order can have weight, and a corpsman steadies her elbow without a word, as an interpreter explains the delousing powder and the latrine line. The American system runs on checklists that turn into life. Separate civilians from combat, sight water upstream, stake latrines downwind, boil tools, bleach buckets, issue minimum food to prevent starvation, and post head counts by village for every tent to see. It looks like paperwork until you watch fear evaporate in a line that moves. It sounds like mercy until you see what it does to the enemy's timeline. The Japanese 32nd Army loses the labor it counted on, and the US rifle companies keep advancing because disease never blooms in the rear. The difference between cave and camp is not just comfort. It is strategy with a human face. In the caves, Rumor whispers of bottles and powders that end life quickly for the hopeless. In the camps, peaches go by the can, blankets by the bundle, jokes by the dozen. A Marine who made a mistake in the dark spends the night hauling the wounded, and then the weak telling children the water is safe. Ruriko watches him teach hand-washing to grandmothers who clap when he gets it right. He grins, embarrassed, then checks a chalkboard for head counts and rice tonnage like it matters more than rank, and here, it does. The enemy counted on terror. The Americans brought rules. The enemy sealed, civilians in damp holes. The Americans put them in houses that did not leak. The enemy treated Okinawans as tools. The Americans paid wages for road gangs and mess hands and hospital attendants at the going 1,940 rate of 1 yen a day. It is not charity, the staff says. It is control at minimum cost, and it wins. Ruriko lies down on a canvas cot and sleeps without coughing. For the first time in months, she believes the morning will come. A corporal reads aloud from the pre-landing brochure, while rain hits the canvas roof. Okinawans are simple, polite, law-abiding, not warlike. Treat them as people, not targets. Separate them from the fighting and turn them over to military government. Then the assault waves hit, and those dry lines become living orders. Nisei interpreters kneel in the mud and bow to grandmothers. The water is safe, they say, and crowds that expected poison begin to drink, wash, and line up for food. This is America briefed for humanity, cultural intelligence issued with rations. The same pamphlet told troops not to play Santa Claus. It warned that early stares would be a mix of Dracula and the sad sack. It told riflemen to pass civilians to the hygiene machine, not to run the machine themselves. The system held because the system was designed. Divisions carried allocations of 70,000 pounds of rice and soybeans for civilians. Medics and engineers and quartermasters and civil affairs moved in lockstep behind the fire. The goal was clear control at minimum cost, and every interpreter made it real. An older woman shakes when the powder bites her scalp, then relaxes as the itch fades. A boy with a cut arm watches the basin shine after a rinse. A mother listens hard as the interpreter explains the latrine line, and then laughs because the young man mimes the whole routine. It feels like theatre, but it is warcraft. Each small rule cuts a link in the disease chain. Each patient explanation saves hours of panic. Each respectful bow turns an enemy's story to dust. The Japanese 32nd Army planned for caves, not clinics, for rumor, not interpreters. It has no answer for a machine that can feed strangers while fighting a 3-month battle. Men who thought they would see monsters watch GIs pay wages, hand out tools, and move families into undestroyed houses. The longer the routine holds, the faster the surrender lines grow. And with every day the brochure proves right. The people are not warlike. They are tired. America did not come to play Santa. It came to win by making tomorrow show up on time, and on Okinawa it did. Mud eats litters on the Shuri slopes. Japanese stretcher teams vanish into rain because, one officer admits, nothing mechanical is available. In the same storm, American trucks grind up clay roads toward camps with sacks of rice, drums of water, crates of medical gear, and the white fog of DDT drifting from sprayers. The contrast is brutal. One army cannot move its wounded, the other can move entire populations and keep them alive. The lesson spreads faster than leaflets. The American pulse is logistics as mercy. Quartermasters track rice and soy allocations by the book, £70,000 per division, while medics mark latrine status and fever cases on chalkboards. Engineers fix culverts so water points stay clean. Civil affairs pays wages in 1 yen coins to build roads and run messes. Interpreters stitch the whole thing together, so a crowd becomes a workforce instead of a mob. The rifles move forward because the rear does not break. A Japanese private, captured near a camp gate, watches a truck stop at a water point and sees the driver check chlorine charts like a gunner checks elevation. he whispers. Your trucks never stop. He is not wrong. Through rain and counterattacks, the convoys bring calories, blankets, and disinfectant on a schedule that looks impossible in a war zone. It is not kindness alone, it is scheduled discipline at scale. The enemy thought. Terror would slow the Americans. It didn't. The enemy thought disease would do what bullets couldn't. It didn't. When civilians see that the occupier feeds the enemy's families, they decide that betting on Tokyo means betting on caves and coughs, and that bet is for losers. Surrender lines grow, rumor dies. A war that might have turned into plague, instead turns into paperwork. By the time the last ridges fall silent, the numbers tell a story that sounds like boasting until you check the ledgers. 250,000 civilians processed, minimum supplies preventing starvation, outbreaks averted because many tons of DDT erased the vectors. Latrines enforced even when the oddest problem was teaching elderly women to use them. Trucks never stopped because the plan said they couldn't. And because they didn't, rifle companies kept their strength and tempo. On these roads, the arsenal of democracy proved that mercy can move like armor and crush anything in its way. The ledger under the tarp looks like a city plan, not a battle map. Villages are listed in chalk, head counts next to each, rice tonnage in neat columns, latrine status ticked with care. A lieutenant traces tomorrow's deliveries with his finger as rain claps the canvas. It is not dramatic. It is victory. The book proves that America can conjure a working public health state out of chaos, hold it in place, and do it while its divisions fight through ridges and caves. Pay tables, thump. Wages go out at the going 1,940, rate 1 yen a day to Okinawans, who take shifts on roads, in mess tents, and in hospital wards. Separating civilians from combat zones is no longer an order, it is a payroll. Engineers open culverts and stake latrines, medics boil tools and bleach buckets. Interpreters repeat rules until they become habits. Every action cuts risk, saves time, and feeds momentum. Control at minimum cost becomes a rhythm you can see in pencil lines and ration chits. The scale is the part that stuns. Over 250,000 civilians move through detention camps. Minimum rations prevent starvation. Many tons of DDT strangle the old killer's mosquitoes. Fleas and flies, so the grim math of previous island wars never lands here. The oddest discipline problem is still grandmothers and latrine lines. Once they adopt the new routine, the fever chart bends like a flag catching wind. Numbers turn into breath. Breath turns into work. Work turns into quiet nights without coughing. People change inside this machine. A girl from Makabe, who once carried water through shellfire, now hands out blankets and smiles when a marine mimes hand-washing for the 10th time. A widow who bowed until she almost fell now blows a whistle for a work detail and laughs when a private stacks crates the wrong way. A boy who scavenged weeds now posts head counts on the chalkboard and argues about decimals with a clerk. They are not props, they are partners in their own survival. At the front, rifles and mortars still talk. In the rear, the convoy clock never stops, and the chalkboard under the tarp gets cleaner by the day. The brochure had warned troops not to expect gratitude at first. It was right. Gratitude came after the peaches, the wages, the medicine, and the rules. By then, even former enemies could see why resistance was futile. The machine that kept strangers alive would keep marching until the last cave went quiet. A quartermaster flips open a ledger and it hits like a drum. One column for rice and soy, £70,000 per division, locked in before April 1. One for DDT, many tons coming ashore in the same convoys as ammunition. One for wages, 1 yen a day paid to road crews, mess hands, and hospital attendants. Another chalkboard lists village head counts, latrine status, and fever cases. It looks like accounting. It is thunder. This is how the greatest industrial power on earth fought a people's war on a fortress island and still spared a people. Minimum. Food prevented starvation. Potentially destructive epidemics were averted because the old carriers' mosquitoes, fleas, flies were hunted with the same urgency as snipers. The oddest problem was convincing grandmothers to use the latrine line. Solve that and you slam a door on disease. Solve disease and you free regiments to keep fighting at full strength. Logistics becomes mercy. Mercy becomes momentum. A POW from a broken German unit, shuffled across the Pacific as labor, stares at the chalk and whispers, "Only Americans keep books like this and still smile." He watches a corporal correct a decimal and an interpreter translate the correction into a joke. He sees blankets, not bayonets, at the camp gate. He hears children laughing at chow because someone slipped them candy, even after the general said not to play Santa Claus. He senses what the numbers mean. If the enemy can sustain strangers at this scale, it will not stop. The enemy wanted to make Okinawa a tomb. America made it a schedule. The enemy hid civilians in caves and drove nurses into the rain. America pulled families into houses that did not leak and then paid them to rebuild the island under fire. The enemy had rumor and darkness. America had ledgers and light. In those ledgers, the island's future began to take shape before the last ridge fell. When historians ask how victory feels, the answer on Okinawa is simple. Like clean water, like a line that moves, like a basin that shines after a rinse. The figures look braggy until you smell the tents, soap and rice and something sweet from a can. Then you get it. These are not just numbers. They are the shape of a promise kept at gunpoint and at clipboard. This is how a free people fights. By making tomorrow show up, even here. Night falls, and the camp smells like soap, carbolic, and cooked rice. Ruriko lies on a canvas cot and whispers the first honest sentence she has said in months. It's clean. That word is not small. It is the last mile of a supply chain that began in stateside warehouses and moved across the largest armada in history to an aid tent on a ruined island. Clean means the DDT fog worked. Clean means the latrine line held. Clean means the next cough won't turn into the next funeral. The payoff is not a banner. It is a graph that never spikes. Over 250,000 civilians are concentrated in camps, and yet epidemics do not explode. Minimum rations stop hunger from turning into revolt. Wages at 1 yen a day turn chaos into crews. The very machines that brought rifles also brought blankets, pay tables, and interpreters who turned terror into cooperation. No other nation on Earth in 1945 could land that blend of force and foresight and keep it running under fire. The enemy tried to make misery a weapon. America out-organized misery. It arrived with a blueprint for public health, payrolls, language, food, and law, and executed it with a discipline that looks cold, until you watch a grandmother bow to the Marine who just taught her how to wash her hands. A young officer taps the chalkboard and sees not numbers but lives put back in sequence. A corporal closes the ledger and smiles because the decimals add up to something more than math. Ruriko sleeps through midnight. In the morning, a Nisei interpreter announces the water schedule. A corpsman pours disinfectant like a priest pours oil. A boy posts fresh head counts, proud of his neat figures. Trucks roll like clockwork. The rifles will finish their part soon. But the real story is already in motion. A people saved while a fortress falls. The final truth hits harder because it is quiet. America won with guns, yes. But also with soap, rules, ledgers, wages, and respect. It turned peaches into morale, latrines into artillery, and DDT into armor against the oldest enemy of all. That is why the island did not become a tomb. That is why a teenager from a cave can breathe easy and believe in a future again. Clean is a promise, and on Okinawa, America kept it.